Hey everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. Religion can be a great thing for some people, but sometimes people take it to an extreme level, much like the dude in this Dungeons & Dragons game. To the story. You're attacking my religion. The story of a Christian player who took things too far. By Reddit user, She Who Dances. Before we get into things, this player is a religious person, and I know all religious people are not like this. Anyway, I've been playing tabletop RPGs on and off for the past few years, but found myself dry after leaving a long-time group of friends. So I went to the most reputable places possible to find a game. Requests for online tabletop RPGs in nerd shops. One Discord invite later, I was in the server, meeting the cast. DM, the DM of our party. Actually an absolutely excellent person, with a few flaws that made this story horrific. Fundy, the problem player. A very religious person who enjoyed passionate sermons. A few other players were present, but they didn't contribute to the story in any major way. We get to character creation, and I decided to pull out my usual character, a paladin who broke her oath because she was tired of being strict and holy. She was constantly a bit jaded, foul-mouthed, and sat at a 45-degree angle in her seat, being generous. Fundy played a cleric of the F it, I'm gonna call it God, because it was definitely meant to be. He had Christian tenets, he often spoke Bible verses, so on and so forth. Session 0 went pretty well, and afterwards, Fundy messaged me. He wanted our characters to have a backstory together. Basically, he wanted the church I left to be his, and he was trying to lead me back to the Lord. I agreed, because I thought it'd be fun for roleplay stuff, and I had no intention to have my character return to God. Agreeing to this was a bad idea. Most downtime was spent with Fundy, trying to convince my character to abandon her sinful ways, and return to his loving embrace. My character, being a bit of an abrasive prick, would tell him to shove off, or, if he's so loving, why is the world so effed up? Every time I did this, I heard an exasperated breath from his microphone. Eventually, another player messaged me. She liked how our characters interacted, and wondered if they could begin an in-game relationship. I agreed, and this went pretty well. Her character started to draw mine out of her edgy, brooding shell, and the two of them shared some pretty adorable moments, though Fundy did not like this. His character's long tirades now mentioned her as well. He would say things like, "You don't want to drag her down the path as well," and "Women should not lie with one another. You need a man of the cloth, not another woman." My character would try to intimidate him to F off at that. After the session, I messaged the DM to say that Fundy's rhetoric was making me uncomfortable. The DM said that Fundy wasn't like that in real life, that he was just playing his character. Eventually, Fundy posted some art of our characters, AI-generated art at that. My character was depicted as a blonde girl with pale skin and gorgeous plate armor. Now, dear readers, my paladin was black with dark brown hair, with studded leather armor. When I brought this up to him, he said, "Well, this is what I imagined her to look like, but whatever you say." I was a bit perturbed at this, and messaged the DM again. He said something along the lines of, "I can't change what already exists, but I'll talk to Fundy." I don't know if he ever did. Eventually, things broke down. The player character my character was attached to died, and my character retreated back into her shell. She took it badly, becoming moody and confrontational. Fundy saw this as a time to preach to her again, talking about how this was a prime time to repent for my sins and return to my father, so she may be honored in heaven. My character said, "Go away, or my next sin will be cutting you down." This was just intended as an empty threat, as I had done these to other player characters, and never followed up, even having my character apologize for being a tool later. Though Fundy didn't take it like that. Fundy challenged my character to a duel, saying that if he won, she would have to return to the Order. Given this was a kinda bad cleric versus an optimized to hell and back paladin, I absolutely whipped his ass. My character healed him and decided to be a bit of an ass, saying, "Maybe if you spent more time learning to fight, you'd be able to convince me." Fundy flipped out, screaming about how I was a cheater, a sinner, a insert racism, a insert sexism, a insert homophobia, and how I should just get some Christian husband to quote, "take pity on me." He ended his initial screaming rampage with, "And you're attacking my religion." The DM kept trying to calm him down, but he kept screaming and screaming. Eventually, I left the call. The DM sent me a message later, apologizing, and saying that he didn't see this coming at all. I told him that he was stupid for not seeing it coming, and I was giving an ultimatum. Either he kicks Fundy, or I'm leaving. The DM agreed that he made some mistakes, and kicked out Fundy, saying that his character died in our duel. Fundy sent me a few private messages later, continuing his berating and use of slurs, demanding that I stop being into women and come to God, or I'd be unloved and burn in hell. I called him a bitch and blocked him. Holy crap, if Fundy was a Christian, he sure wasn't acting like a good one. I feel I need to reinstate what OP stated at the beginning of her post, that not all religious people are like this, no matter which religion they choose to follow. I'm friends with Christians, and am one myself, and I know for a fact that if we saw this dude acting this way, we would have some choice words for him. I mean, personally, it has helped me a lot in these last 2 years of developing a neurological condition and losing my dad to cancer, which have been the worst years of my life. But I know it's not for everyone, and my friends and I don't shove it down anyone's throat like this player was trying to do. I can understand OP agreeing to play the concept that Fundy proposed to her, because there could be some cool roleplay opportunities in there. But I think Fundy couldn't separate fiction from reality, and probably saw this as an opportunity to try to actually get OP into his religion, and if I'm reading between the lines, also may have had the idea of possibly getting together with her. Then, when he realized that this wasn't going to happen, he just blew up on her out of nowhere. It is good that the DM booted this dude out, as the way he acted was completely unacceptable. Though I think OP might have been a little hard on her DM over this, as not everyone can pick up on little things, and he probably just thought that Fundy's actions were all just roleplay until his blow-up. But I will say that even then, the DM should have talked to Fundy, since OP told him that his actions were starting to make her uncomfortable. But that is just my opinion. Hopefully, OP, the DM, and the rest of the players can continue to have fun with the game, and leave what happened with Fundy as a distant memory. But with that, before we move on to the next post, here is Simba to try to get you to like this video. He is such a wise kitty. And real quick, if you would like to help out more directly, I'll have my Buy Me a Coffee and Ko-Fi links in the description. But with that, let's move on to a story where a Dungeons & Dragons game barely resembles one. To the story. DM thinks it's fun if players die. By Reddit user MattShin99. This is not a super bad story. I was honestly just disappointed. The DM told me he has been DMing for 20 years. I expected more. I had a test one-shot in a new group. DM doesn't want to play 5th edition. We were playing 1st edition, as far as I can tell. The DM hands out some pre-made character sheets, and I end up being a hunter. The others are a mage, a monk, and a thief. I figured cool. The adventure starts, and we are immediately kidnapped by some humanoid insects and caged in a dark cave. They take any big weapons away. Otherwise, I would have had a sword. We manage to get out of the cage, and a fight between the 4 players and 4 insects ensues. We win, but the thief ends up with 1 HP. The monk wants to heal him, but the DM tells her that that would be a waste, since her heal could recover up to 6 HP, and the rogue can only be healed by 3, since his max HP is 4. We ask how we can get HP back, and the DM says that we'll recover 1 HP after every long rest. Man, first edition was pretty brutal, huh? We roleplay a bit to decide how to get out of there. I have a tracking skill, but it only works outside, so it's useless right now, which I tell the others in character. The DM smirks at me and tells me, "That's fun, isn't it?" I kind of want to say no. I have the tracking skill that I can't use. I would have had a sword, but it's been taken away. And as a hunter, I could have an animal companion, but I have to earn or tame that first. I can also collect trophies from things I've killed that give me an attack bonus. It's the only skill of mine that I can use. Now, being restricted in my skills and weapons would be fun if I was a higher level, and forced to use skills or weapons I rarely use in a challenging or creative way. In this situation, I can barely do anything. The game continues, and the DM talks a bit more about his planned campaign. The campaign is supposed to be a sandbox setting. He tells us proudly that there will be no overarching plot, and that it's all up to player agency. If the sessions are ever boring, then that is great, because that's how life is. Okay. Jeez, I'm only reading about this campaign, and I want to quit it. Somehow, we find my sword, and a very wobbly bridge over a deep dark hole. We have a long rope that we tie around my character's waist, and I go first. I have to do a dex roll and succeed. The others have lower dex, so I try to make a handrail out of the rope to make the roll easier for them. I have a grappling hook, and ask the DM if there is anything in the stone walls I can hook that to. He tells me no, so I ask if there's a crack in the stone floors that I can shove my sword into so that I can tie the rope to that, and he says, "I would love to let you do that, but there's nothing there." Something tells me that he wouldn't love for me to do that, or else he might have invented a crack in the floor. I mean, just tell me no. Don't sugarcoat it weirdly. With a bit of a struggle and some lost HP, we all make it over. We have another fight, and at the end, the thief stays at 1 HP. The wizard has 1 HP, and I have 3 HP out of 9. The DM loves it, and tells us how great it is that there are real consequences in this world, and that there are no saving throws, and therefore, characters will die immediately. So during the campaign, we'll have to make new characters. But that's good, because the characters don't matter, because the campaign isn't about them. Well, if there's no overarching plot, and the characters don't matter, then what is the game about? Listen, I am relatively new to D&D. Maybe this is beyond my surface level comprehension, but if the game does not have an overarching plot, and it also isn't about the characters, what happens? We just walk around and do stuff? Is that normal, or am I missing something? Also, I specifically mentioned before that game that I like having a character I can connect to, and the DM agreed. I think the DM and I have very different definitions of that, because I don't like it when a character I really connect with just dies. TLDR, the DM thinks having no skills is fun. The DM thinks when players die, that's fun. The DM thinks having a game that's not about the characters is fun. The DM thinks having no storyline is fun. I think all of that can be fun, but definitely not at the same time. Yeah, I would say that this is definitely a case of no D&D is better than bad D&D, though that game sounded like it was already like no D&D. My advice to OP, seeing how they are a new player, would be to look for a different game, because that game, if you even want to call it that, just sounds like it would be boring as hell. Like OP said, some of those things can be fun in D&D, but when they're all combined together, well, it doesn't really sound like D&D. Though, what do y'all think? But with that, let's move on to a case where a player just can't find any luck with a certain D&D group. To the story. Player tried to dox me over a "which class is weaker" argument, and the Dungeon Master took their side. By Reddit user Mob Talon. This was about a year ago. I was playing in an online group with my girlfriend. We had found this group via Discord, and the DM seemed like a genuinely fun guy to hang around. We took video calls and such, and the vibes matched very well. We started the campaign, and from the get-go, it was quite the interesting experience. Our characters would get tested to the limit. We'd end sessions with, "Damn, these enemies were OP. Can't believe we survived that," feelings. There were about 5 of us, but one player was creepy, uncooperative, and overall, hedonistic. They played a druid, and would describe their character in great detail as a 6 foot, 10 inches tall, dom furry, whenever they'd just turn into a beast. It was a wild experience, though this post is not about them, but about the player that replaced them. Oh, don't worry, we'll get into that player after this story. After the druid player was kicked out, this new player, let's call them Daniel, came in. Daniel seemed okay. Actually, a great change of pace for the party. They would give good ideas, engage in a bit of tomfoolery in a very modest way, and was overall a great addition. That is, until someone spoke of 1D&D and discussed classes. This campaign was happening as the 2024 Player's Handbook and UAs were being released. Daniel thought rogues were the most broken class in the game, and that they should always be gutted in every game. I found that foolish, and so did the other party members, but only I was vocal about it. They would also say that paladins are getting absolutely destroyed and becoming the weakest class in D&D with the updates, which is why he hated 1D&D and everyone who supported it. Once again, only I was vocal to tell him otherwise. I said, paladins are getting their power redistributed. Their nova is somewhat disappearing. They can still deal a lot of damage, and their options each turn are getting expanded a lot. Though Daniel didn't like this. A bit of back and forth, and Daniel said, "If you think paladins are so good, then roll a 1D&D paladin and fight my 2014 barbarian." I just refused, because a class isn't stronger than another based on what they can do to each other, but rather on what they can do on a PvE setting compared to other classes. It's certainly not fun if you're up against a boss, and the paladin drops max level smites in one turn to take 80% of the boss's HP, while the team deals the rest. It doesn't feel like the others earned the win. They called me a coward and a cheat. I escalated by calling him an idiot that genuinely believes rogues are broken. After escalating on both sides, they started threatening to dox me, threatening to send specific dead animals' heads and dildos. Well, that escalated quickly. As someone with knowledge on the matter of doxing, the threat didn't scare me, but the intention behind it did. It's genuinely borderline impossible to get one's location via IP without an IP grabber. We had a player in the game that genuinely said these things. It took 2 hours of fighting back and forth, and me belittling them and provoking them to, quote, show me my IP then, until Daniel finally admitted he was full of crap. The most messed up part? When the Dungeon Master caught wind of this, Daniel started gaslighting me and saying that not only I started it, but I threatened them. Because I took screenshots, I showed the receipts to the DM in private, though they told me that it was my fault for, quote, poking the landmine. Well, okay, but the issue shouldn't be who poked the landmine, but rather why the F is the easily triggered landmine there in the first place. I had to make an SA analogy for them to get it. Something along the lines of, it's your fault for getting assaulted. Why did you talk to the guy? After thanking me for showing him how Daniel was a manipulative sack of shit, he said he'd put the campaign on a hiatus in order to recover from this. Why a hiatus? Either talk to the player and get them to apologize or kick him. Those kinds of threats should not be taken lightly, and doing a hiatus won't do crap. I come to find out a month later, via another player, let's call her Lila, that the DM was making another campaign, excluding me and my girlfriend, to play with the other players, and Daniel. Lila didn't not tell me on purpose. She thought I'd be joining too, because she was just asking for advice on creating her character. So, I guess the Dungeon Master meant a hiatus from OP. That's messed up. At this point, I just gave up. A few months later, when the DM wanted to resume our campaign, me and my girlfriend just told him no and quit. TLDR, DM has poor taste in players, kicking one out and bringing in another that ended up threatening me with doxing and mailing me effed up things. Well, it certainly seems like the DM might have been friends with Daniel in real life or something, as that is the only reason I can think of as to why he decided to keep playing games with Daniel and not telling OP, and even siding with Daniel after the argument, even though OP had proof of the doxing threats. Though I will say that this goes to show that sometimes when someone is saying something you disagree with, it may just be a good idea to let it go, as it did sound like OP escalated things a bit by calling Daniel an idiot over something so trivial. But Daniel definitely overstepped a boundary when he threatened to send OP those things. That is just psychotic. So it is probably best that OP decided to just not play with that DM anymore, as the DM seemed not to care about that at all. But speaking about strange players, OP alluded to one that was kicked before this whole debacle, and even posted another story about said player. So let's listen to that tale. To the post. About the creepy, uncooperative, and hedonistic druid player in my previous post. By Reddit user Mob Talon. A few people were quite curious about the druid from my previous post, and only a few got to see the case via a comment I made on that player. After rereading the comment, I believe it definitely warrants its own post. This druid player, let's call them Druid to keep it simple, Druid had implied they were touching themselves during our calls several times. Whoa, right out of the gate with this one, huh? The first time we thought it was a joke, and in a gig of tomfoolery, we played along with taunts. Though apparently it wasn't a joke, as they seriously would go quiet at times, and we'd hear suspicious noises. Some of these times, if we called for them enough, they would reply with, "Hold on," while quote-unquote panting. I think that's the word. Holy crap, it almost makes you wonder how anyone could move past this. Somehow, we would move past this by genuinely taking a what we can't see can't bother us approach. But in hindsight, holy cow, that was effed up. They were a trans woman, but looked extremely masculine, as in a full-grown beard and clothing, to the point that no one in the party knew if they were being edgy or serious. We tried to be respectful regardless, because it's not our business to decide what they are for themselves. Druid was playing a shifter 5th edition race, Druid, with a Displacer Beast special transformation. They'd keep transforming in and out of a quote, humanoid, 6'10 tall furry dude with very uncomfortable attempts at being Dom. One such example being something along the lines of, "When you notice me, I'm no longer a small animal, but now you see a 6'10", insert very specific description of a furry character, towering over you, looking down on you from up close, as I say, humph, with a smile." To say that made me uncomfortable is an understatement. On that same session, we defeated a boss-type enemy, which was his character's adoptive mom, a green hag. That green hag was being controlled by Druid's nemesis, and told him, "I hoarded quite a few magical items. They will help you and your party to avenge me," with her last breath. Druid decided that all magic items, we're talking about like 4 attunement magic items and 6 more non-attunement ones, were theirs because it's their heirloom, despite the DM hinting at them that maybe it would be best to share, even going as far as staging a flashback of the green hag telling Druid when they were young, "You should always share with your friends." And instead of focusing on the plot, they wanted to stay back to rebuild the hag's home. On the day of the next session, Druid would skip the session, only to 2 days later tell us that he was kidnapped by the Brazilian cartel, as in actively being kidnapped. Wait, what? Betrayed by his in-real-life friends, who apparently wanted to, quote, make money off of selling his organs to the cartel, while still texting into the Discord server. Did Druid actually think that anyone would take that seriously? We didn't take it seriously, at all. One of my lines was, "And were the Mr. Cartel members nice enough to let you keep your phone to text us on Discord?" The next 2 weeks were comprised of Druid insisting on the kidnapping, until somehow the police finally rescued them. "My friends did this because I'm trans," they claimed. I'm not sure why it took us that long for us to have had enough, but the DM, after discussing with us, decided to kick Druid out because they were just too much to handle. To this day, I haven't heard from Druid, and honestly, I'm glad. Well, that certainly was something. By the sounds of things, OP just didn't have much luck with this group at all. And maybe it was best that they not be in that group, because it doesn't seem like the DM has much of a vetting process. I mean, part of me wants to believe that Druid was just messing with this group with the over-the-mic sounds, the whole furry Dom thing, and shot for the moon with the kidnapping story. But there is always the possibility that Druid had some sort of mental thing going on, and actually did those things, and thought that the group would buy that whole story as to why they missed a session. Either way, I hope that OP and his girlfriend can find another group that is a good fit, because after dealing with all of that crap, I think they deserve some good Dungeons and Dragons. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.